If you go back to our classics, our Indian texts, you can see there is an ample way they actually differ. So I give you the first example. The first example is religion is sort of same for all communities, right? So if you are a Christian, whoever you are, you have a sort of same religion for all. But dharma is not like that. Dharma depends on the basically particular social role you are in, your profession, your age, the time, and all these many issues. In the Ramayana, there is a crisis in dharma, so to say, when Ramachandra was told by his father that we have to go to forest. Now Rama's mother, Kaushalya, she is bifurcated in two selves. At one self, she has to adhere to the dharma as mother, and she has to support her son. At the other end, she has the dharma as wife, where she has to support the husband. And she is torn in between. And she says, well, for me, the dharma as wife takes precedence. So I'll sort of stand by my husband's decision. But of course, my blessings are with you. Mahabharata is conflict of different dharmas. Conflict of different dharmas. So the duties are also sort of have contradictions each other, and that contradiction Arjuna faced in Gita and all. And then towards the end, so basically Sri Krishna said, Sarvadharmam parityajya mamekam saranam braja. So it talks about a concept where all dharmas can be harmonized by a dharma towards Atman. So these are very more deeper philosophical notes. But the point I'm trying to say that essentially dharma is duty is probably the correct one, but that duty has to be sort of defined by various forces of the universe, not by sort of some limited understanding as modernity often does. Thank you very much for having me here. It would be nice if you sort of intervene, and if you have any question or so on this particular topic. So I have I don't have too many slides and something, but I have a framework to show, and I'll show you in the appropriate time. So let me speak a few minutes, and then maybe I'll show you the framework. So the topic is not a sort of an academic topic per se. It is quite a critical topic. So I give you 2-3 examples why this criticality matters. For example, when you do conduct census, we ask people to talk about a particular religion, right? Now, I am not allowed to call myself two particular religions. I have to sort of one particular religion, I have to box tick in, and that precludes me from ticking the others. This is coming with an assumption, because the moment the idea is you cannot really belong to two of the things together. Of course, this is something that has been challenged. It has been particularly challenged in Japan, where they allow people to sort of tick multiple options. And most of the Japanese, they call themselves simultaneously Shinto, and as well as call themselves Buddhists. So in some sense, they sort of have evolved in different paradigm on this. Secondly, whenever we are think about India we are talking about a secular state and all. The moment we talk about a secular state, it automatically boils down to contradicting our own tradition. So, for example, there are petitions. So there are Sanskrit verses everywhere in all the institutions. And many times there are petitions that have been raised, and Supreme Court often takes them seriously. That And these verses, they say that this verse is coming from some source, from from some Indian text like Upanishad or something like that, and therefore it is part of Dharma religion, and therefore it should be not be there in a secular institution. So it eventually, if you talk to a liberal, I mean, by liberal, I always mean left liberal because they are sort of dominant persons in the discourse. They always consider the tradition is sort of an atrocity for the very particular reason that whenever we talk about a tradition, they say, well, it's about a dharma, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever you call it, and because it's a religion, it's a bad thing. In a secular state, we cannot allow it. So your tradition becomes an enemy not for any inner reason. It becomes an enemy because it is classified in the category of something called the religion. So this is a very sort of a serious issue, I think, and this is again why this discussion is quite important. The third reason is whenever we are sort of talk about the Indian ideas, Indian thoughts, and taking the leadership, there's a very sort of a very popular thing in the right wing, so-called right wing circles, that India, globalizing Indian thought, or sort of like India being the Jagat Guru, Vishwa Guru sort of thing. So basically, what do we mean? We mean that our framework, our paradigm has to go everywhere. But the problem is, the moment you try to take it seriously beyond the ornamental words, you have to essentially discuss why the Western approved secularity is not sufficient and why we should sort of need the idea of dharma. So there is a natural clash between the secularity and our thing is coming, and we probably don't want to equate our cause with an Islamic Sharia state or sort of the medieval age Christian state. It is a very different phenomenon we want to probably highlight. That highlight would be missing as long as dharma is classified as religion. So I've shown three reasons why it is a very sort of an important question. It is not an academic question per se. It is a sort of an important question. So if you look at the word dharma and the idea of dharma, it talks about some duties on you, some impositions on you. And the religion also does the same thing. If you are a sort of a Christian, you have to go to sort of a, Sunday mass, that sort of you should go. I mean, the Catholics call it mass. Protestants has a different name. But essentially, you have to go to the church on Sundays. You have to do this and that for the community. And sending, you have to teach Bible to your kids. And if you talk about dharma, it has also some restrictions. Some are lost, some are still there. But this is sort of some restrictions are coming. There is also another thing, very some sense. Basically, religions are coming from a god, an authority, Lord, God. It is translated as Lord in the King James Bible, but of course, it is often referred as God. Um, Dharma is sort of Bhagwan or Ishar. Is it sort of paramount to a dharma? Well, we don't know that, and there can be debates, but often it is taken for granted that dharma is sort of related to Bhagwan or God, and therefore there is some parallel. Based on that, the case is made that dharma is equal to religion, and if you go back to our classics, our Indian texts, you can see there is an ample way they actually differ. So I give you the first example. The first example is religion is sort of same for all communities, right? So if you are a Christian, whoever you are, you have a sort of same religion for all. But dharma is not like that. Dharma depends on the basically particular social role you are in, your profession, your age, the time, and all these many, many issues. I can show you some examples. If you look at the Ramayana, for example, right? In the Ramayana, there is a crisis in dharma, so to say, when Ramachandra was told by his father that we have to go to forest. Now, Rama's mother, sorry, Kaushalya, she is bifurcated in two selves. At one self, she has to adhere to the dharma as mother, and she has to support her son. At the other end, she has the dharma as wife, where she has to support the husband. And she is torn in between. And she says, well, for me, the dharma as wife takes precedence. So I'll sort of stand by my husband's decision. But of course, my blessings are with you. So you can see the same person is torn. And this same friction, this is with Kaushalya. The same friction is not enjoyed by, for example, Lakshman, right? He doesn't have such friction. So the dharma for different persons are different. So if I have many of my good colleagues are Christians. So they, as a father, their role to their son, putting in a good school in the current modern context and give good education, overall development. Now, my role as my son is also the same. So, in some sense of the term, the word religion has nothing to talk about it on this matter, right? But if I talk about it dharma wise, of course, it is a dharma as a father that I am abiding. So you can see a lot of these things are coming up. So maybe I'll show you the slide now because I've shown you a little bit.
All right.
So basically, I have put 3 points to discuss the differences between dharma and religion. The first point is dharma creates no imagined community. If you are a father, there's nothing to imagine there. It's a social role, you are there. And basically, if you are a mother, you are a mother. It's a biological term, and there is nothing to imagine there. If I'm a teacher, I'm a teacher by profession, nothing to imagine there. But if you talk about religion, it does create a lot of imaginary communities. This word imaginary community is not my word. It has been used by Benedict Anderson, thinker who wrote a book against nation. But anyway, so I'll just quote Abul Kalam Azad, our first education minister in independent India. What Abul Kalam Azad is saying. He is saying, I'm quoting him, quote, this biradari, that is community of Muslims, has been established by God. All relationships in the world can break down, but this relationship can never be severed. It is possible a father turns against his son, not impossible that a mother separates her child from her lap. It is possible that one brother becomes the enemy of other brother. But the relationship that a Chinese Muslim has with an African Muslim, an Arab Bedouin has with the Tatar Shepherd, and which binds in one soul a neo Muslim of India with the right descendant Qurayshi of Mecca, there is no power on earth to break it, to cut off the chain. So, end quote. So what basically he is saying that father and son's relationship, mother and child's relationship, brother and brother's relationships, these might say worldly relations, and these can break down. But even then, they could break down the relationship any Muslim anywhere in the world has with another Muslim, that will sort of never break down. I think this is quite big, right? In the sense that he is saying that there is an imagined community, and that community is the Muslims, and that is being created by the religion. So the idea of this religion, it is of course coming from Christianity, but it has its parallels. And of course, religion of Christianity creates a community called Christendom. Christian before the paradigm of nation state arrived, as a matter of Westphalian Treaty, 1648, the entire Europe used to be called Christendom, right? Home of the Christians. And that is sort of the community, favored community or something like that, that was used to be thought of. Similarly, parallels exist in the Muslim. There is the idea of deen. The deen means basically what is religion, and it creates qawms or some people call it madhab. The deen is also called madhab. I think deen is sort of, one of them is a Persian word, another one is the Arabic word. Um, so basically, again, these madhabs or deens, they create a sort of a kaum. Kaum means basically community, which or biradari, which is basically Abul Kalam Azad is saying. So an imaginary community is created by religion, which is not the case with dharma. This is the second idea, which is basically, I talked about, that as a father, my duty to my son, it is based on principles that can find resonance in this world, right? Because we all know that there is something called sustainability of own legacy that every human being craves. And because of that, I want to build my son a capable person or my child a capable person, and therefore I have to educate him in proper way. So this is a secular principle in some sense, based on these worldly principles. However, in a religion, there are some principles that must be based on afterworld. This world may have no any sort of application in it. For example, if you think about the idea of faith in Jesus Christ, and it is said that this faith may not actually help you a lot of the times in this world. It is written in the Bible and scriptures, it is also said. But this is the something, this faith that will save you in the afterworld. And this is why you should have this faith. So this faith is not required for this world at all. But this is only required for the afterworld. So this is something religion is saying, which is not said by dharma, right? As a matter of fact, you can see many people who are dharmic people, but they did not believe in afterworld. One very famous person is mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana. He's called Jabali. Jabali, so Dasarath have 8 ministers. Out of the 8 ministers, one minister was Jabali. And then basically, um, as you all know the story of the Ramayana, but so also maybe I'll summarize in 20 seconds to the point I'm referring to. So Ramachandra left for the forest, and then Dasaratha, his father, perished, grieved by absence of sons. Then Bharata was called up from his mother's place, that is in basically Kekai. And then Bharat comes, and then Bharat decides that Ramachandra must be anointed. So Bharat sort of decides that he will go to the Chitrakut. He did not know Chitrakut as of then, but he knew that Ramachandra in the forest, so he decided that he will go to Ramachandra and ask him to take over this, basically, the kingdom. So he sort of started a party with his, all his ministers and everybody, and they eventually reached Chitrakuta. After reaching Chitrakuta, they tried to convince Rama that the futility of this idea of leaving this world, leaving this kingdom, and Bharat wanted to Raman to take up. So they eventually did not succeed, but there's a lot of arguments that went on. This is knitted in Ajodhya Kanda, I think Sarga 100 or so. So there, Jabali, the minister, he said Rama that there is no afterlife. I don't see beyond what we see here. And in view of that, what you are thinking of your king, your father Dasarath, is meaningless. Whatever is talked about, because that person does not exist in this world. So all these worldly justifications are gone. This is not a good thing. And Rama sort of did not like it. He called Jabali and Nastik and all. So this is sort of ended there. But anyway, so the point I'm trying to say that the Jabali was a very respected person, and everybody later also praised Jabali for his things. But then he apparently did not believe in this world and all, but he believes in the other. So he did not believe in the other world. He believes on everyone this world. There is also some this worldly argument also given by Rama. So the idea is, if the rulers they deviate from their words, the entire population will sort of imitate them, and therefore everybody will deviate from their own words, and then the idea of sort of trustful society shall not exist. And once that kind of society is gone, then things will become governance will become really bad. So from this secular argument also he justified Rama, but Rama has also both kind of arguments. So again, you can see there is a difference sort of coming up between dharma and religion. Now, these things, Bal Gangadhar, S.N. Bal Gangadhar, his book, famous book, The World in, The Heathen in His Blindness. This is a very famous book. It was published in 1988. And here he sort of claimed this thing very rigorously. He said that Indian traditions, whether you call it Hinduism or Buddhism, they do not have the idea of religion in it. It is a completely secular tradition. Because it is a secular tradition, we should not have a religion in India. And he has 12 chapters. I'll sort of summarize his book a little bit in the time we have today. But basically his idea is religions are so I think I have made a mistake in this sort of slide. Here it will be other way. So religions are sort of theory driven, whereas the dharma is sort of an empiric driven. So Indian traditions are based on what you see in this world, so they change. And therefore we have these sastras called smriti sastras, and the smriti sastras are based on time. So we talk about Manusmriti, and there is a lot of tirades going on against Manusmriti time to time, particularly before the elections. But the idea of the Manusmriti was valid only for that time. It is not actually valid for today. So all the tirade is sort of completely meaningless from that point of view. And secondly, the idea of this Manusmriti, the idea of the Smriti is new Smriti has to be written based on the practices of the times. So it is not the book will come first and then you sort of people will have to follow. No, it's not that. The idea of the Smriti is that you look at the population, look at the best practices that is going on in the social spheres, and you sort of enumerate them so that everybody knows the best practices. In management, we call it best practices, which are sort of working well in everywhere. So just look at those best practices and write it down. And that's how this book has to be written. So it is not basically the book first and then people. It is basically people first and people experiences, best part of their experiences is being codified as a smriti. So it is basically people first. So that way it is empiric driven, right? And of course, it has to change with time to time. As so basically, Manusmriti was of course, nobody knows how old it is, and there's a lot of considerable debates. But definitely, it is. It won't be an exaggeration to say that it is maybe 1800 years old at least. But the last bhashya of Manusmriti was one of the bhashya was written by Medhatithi, and that was in 950 AD, or maybe 1,000 years ago. And there he sort of changed a little bit. He said, well, this has to be taken in the current spirit this way and that, like that. Similarly, those kind of bhashyas was written by later ones, and they have so changed it. Right. So now, so from that point, so basically we can see the idea of the empiric driven. On the other hand, if you look at the religions, the theories are given, and these theories cannot be changed, right? I mean, if you talk about Quran, for example, this is the theory that is from there the Sharia Islamic law comes. That you cannot change the Quran. So basically, there's a Saudi prince, Salman, Muhammad bin Salman. He sort of said that, well, we'll look at the Quran and we'll reinterpret it in the current light, but the original idea cannot be changed. Something like that. So Quran cannot be changed. We can only interpret it differently, and for that he also said that we'll not look into the hadiths. We'll sort of discard all the hadiths beyond 100 or so. But that is pretty much it. And if you look at again these Christian laws, the canon laws, they also cannot be changed. So unless you sort of becoming a secular state, you can't really discard them. So Ireland was a Christian state, and for a long time the divorce was not permitted and all. And there's a considerable problem because in a Catholic state the divorce cannot exist. But it has to be a secular state to sort of repeal this law. Right. So the theory, because the theory cannot be changed. So this is all I had to have in mind. Now maybe I'll talk about a little bit on Balu's book, and then I'll go whatever the questions audience have for me. I think that is sort of the way to do. So Balu's book actually has 12 chapters divided under 4 sort of sections. The first section talks about how the idea of religion as we know today came. It came from Christianity. So before of course, you have to understand, it came in the Roman world, and the Rome was a pagan land. So what I am saying for idea of the dharma, it is not very particular to India. It was the universal idea all over the world, all over the pagan world. It was true once in Greece, it was true once in Rome, it was true once in Africa, it was true once among the Indians, um, indigenous Americans, everywhere. But as Christianity uh, and to an extent like Islam later, they went over different places. This idea of dharma was sort of lost in some sense, and therefore it is now restricted to possibly India, some parts of Asia, like some Southeast Asia, maybe a bit in Japan, but that's pretty much it. Chinese religions are not quite doing well in China, but it might be the case that there is also some sense there. But this is pretty much the sphere we are now limited to. So I will give you a very common example that the idea that God, in a Christian God in the Bible, is the same as the other gods. So the more or less Christian theologians, they never agree on that. They sort of say it's a very different thing. As a matter of fact, the pagan gods are sort of called demons. So you see these Hollywood movies where you can see some statues, pagan statues. I know these, I think, exorcists, omen, and then they are sort of demonic and other things. It is actually a sort of a Christian idea, because the other gods, they are also power exists to an extent, but they are not the true God. They are false gods. Therefore, they has to be sort of demons. But in the pagan world, there is no problem, because in the pagan world there is no such thing as God. There was a deity for sun, there is a deity for moon, there is a deity for let's say science or arts, called muse, and there are different deities for different fields. And there are different deities whenever there is a different deities. So let's say Apollo was the deity of sun for among the Greeks, and in Persia the corresponding deity was Mitra. And people sort of said, well, Apollo is equal to Mitra because they are both sun gods in some sense of the term. So, and this is sort of they agree upon, because these are sort of in this world, particular world, representing one sort of social dimension, and this is how it was. In fact, if you start reading Odyssey, the famous Greek epic, you see there is a conference of different gods, all representing different social powers, and they are deciding what should happen to Odysseus, and different persons are presenting their perspective. So it is as if a sort of a talk of this world is going on, but not in the very small level, in a higher level, a sort of board of directors level of this world. But that's pretty much it. Um, but yeah, so I think I sort of so now in Balu's book, it talks is the saga begins in the pagan world, pagan Rome, and their religio is sort of very similar what dharma means today. So, for example, there's a character Cicero, right? He's there in our Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. He has borrowed it, but Cicero was a very prominent intellectual of those times. He was a pagan priest, but he was atheist, just like Jabali. That's how it is. Because but he still believed in the religio, tradition, and all these sort of things. Now, this idea, uh, how this idea in the Roman world, Balu's story, it is sort of from there how Christianity is changing it. It describes in the first chapter. And this is something he notes, Balu. He notes that the Christians, when they landed in the later times, when they landed in North America and other places, they found people are very different, not like unlike the Christian world. And they say also, many people, that there is nothing what we traditionally call religion among these people. They wrote it, early Christians, like 16th century, 15, 16, 15, mostly in the 15th and 16th centuries. And then basically those times, and this is not again a very sort of controvertible view. This is sort of more incontrovertible. If you go to writings of some people, For example, there is a very prominent Christian author, Tom Holland. He writes books like Dominion and other books. Tom Holland also says that there is no religion before sort of Christianity began. So in India, we sort of say Hinduism is the oldest religion, but this is not something many Christians believe in. They think that Christianity gave us sort of religion, and that's what Tom Holland says. And I have seen many training sessions. YouTube is there in YouTube nowadays, uh, of the priests who are coming India for evangelizing missions from from Europe, and they are being told, well, Hinduism is not the religion that we know as if it's a very different sort of thing. And this is sort of something that has been told repeatedly over and over by many people, no less than Macaulay, for example. Now, what happened? The first part of the Balu's book deals with how basically Christianity changed the idea of the tradition to religion as we know today. See, this is 3 chapters are dedicated to that. The second idea was how they looked the other cultures, Christianity. After Christianity went to other places, end of the medieval times. So they went to the Americas, of course, Asia and Africa. All the people were pagans and they did not have the idea of religion. So the Christian preachers, they wanted to understand the world. And when they wanted to understand the world, the way they have to do it, they have to put a religion on them. Otherwise, they would not be able to figure out how the society is, because it's a very religious culture they are coming from. So they can't really expect any secular culture sort of a thing explain. This they are lost. So they have to impose a religion on them. And this is how religions like Chinese religions, Japanese religions, Shintoism, and of course Hinduism, Buddhism, all were born. As a matter of fact, Buddhism was not found in India originally. Originally, it was found in other countries, Asian countries. And from there, they developed the idea of Buddhism as a religion. They did not even know that time that Buddha was actually from India. So later they came to the discovery, and then they have to sort of understand it. Had they discovered in India this idea of Buddha, probably they would call it part of a Hinduism as of today also. I mean, as is. So, for example, the idea of Jainism, it is very similar to Buddhism in many sense, but it was found only in India, not outside India, and it used to be only part of Hinduism. So it formally it became separate from Hinduism in 2013, because the Jains, they felt that they can't run their education institution because of Indian constitution, and therefore they wanted to seek the minority status quite seriously. And that time the government also granted it to them. So the second part is Balu's book is about how the Christians, they look into the world and they sort of figured out, put some religions to them. The third part is about the secular world. Now, the secular world, we sort of think it has formed in an abstract domain. No, it's absolutely not. That's what Balu says. It is formed actually in a Christian land with the Christian ideas. So whatever was Christian, they just deassociated God from those ideas and they called them secular ideas. So one very particular case can be illustrated with John Locke. John Locke is called the father of classical liberalism. He was a devout Protestant Christian. But the moment he started his secular discourse, whatever was the Protestant idea, so that man will have sort of freedom in this world to pursue his employment, livelihood, and other things. So those are he written secular without mentioning God. And they sort of started the foundation of the initial secular doctrine of liberalism. This is what it is. And then fourth part, Balu says, okay, what if we believe that India is not a religious country, but it's a secular country? And then, I mean, secular culture, not country, culture. And then basically he gave some implications of this worldview. And he said what can be tested and all. And they sort of come up quite well, I would say, on hindsight. So basically, Balu's book is so long, I can't even attempt to, I mean, it has many good arguments, subtle arguments, but only if sort of people want to go deep in it. But if I want to cover the book, it will take no less than 2 hours. So I'm not even attempting that. Instead, what I would like you, let's those who are here today, I'll sort of ask you your questions. Maybe if you have some questions, some particular aspects of my argument and etc., I'll be very happy to talk to you on that particular aspect. I think that is worthwhile that I can do. Is a Bharat a secular country because of dharma? So the idea of the secular, how do you see something is secular? Very important. Now, one way you can say that secular will sort of be non-discriminative towards any denomination. Now, the word secular was not even known to Indians, but this idea that we have to be sort of equal to other people, what are extensively prevalent in India. For example, in Vishnu Puran, there is a definition. It is given Uttaranga Samudrasya Himadrischa Dakshinam Varsam Tad Bharatam Namang Bharati Tatra Santati. So basically, north of sea, north of the ocean, and south of the Himalayas, we have this land region which is called Bharata, and this all these people are called Bharati. We call Bharatiya now, but that time it is called Bharati in Sanskrit. So essentially, it actually means that there is no discrimination among people that who are sort of true citizens or not, right? For example, in the this is written, I don't know, people say in the 500-600s AD or something, but that time the idea of nationality was not based on residence most of the places. The idea of the citizenship has to do with your faith and other things in those times, in the medieval times, throughout the world. But if you see in India that time itself, it shows a remarkable sort of nature of secularity. So from that point of view, we can of course say the idea of the secularism is sort of what we have inherited from Dharma. So that part is very well, goes well. But the idea of secularism does not stop here. It goes something more than that, right? So the idea of secularism, the way we know in India, that may demand that no deity should be sort of. So if you have a puja, Saraswati, so in my institute where I belong, I work, it's a national institute, but it's a secular constitution. So we do not worship Saraswati, goddess Saraswati, right? Because Saraswati is a Hindu deity, right? Because we are a secular nation, we should not do that. And that's why we do not do that. But then this is a big problem from some point of view because um, in some sense of the term, because if you see in India, when it was a dharmic nation, Saraswati used to be worshipped. And Saraswati was to be worshipped was sort of not found anything anti-dharmic or anti-secular from Indian secular sort of point of view by many Muslim writers. So in West Bengal, there are two Muslim writers I know at least. There are much more than that. So one is name is Syed Mustafa Ali. Syed Mustafa Ali was a very accomplished person, and he was sort of he knew like 17, 18 languages, and he was a very curious person and all. So there are some stories he said that he basically went and he used to sort of see Saraswati as a deity of wisdom and all, right? And there is of course Qazi Nazrul Islam, who wrote different songs to Hindu deities, um, invoking them. And if you look at even the Indian Bengali Muslims, um, I mean Bengali speaking Muslims, in the 19th century, middle part of 19th century, they used to worship Lakshmi. They were like agrarian communities, and for them, the moment you reap the entire whatever you produce for the particular month, that time you worship Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity, and that used to be a sort of a very big thing that time, right? So from all this point of view, uh, the idea of the secularity was quite prevalent, but we did not know the idea of secularism. The moment you say that secularism is something very important, but the way of secularism we learn from the West, what becomes that we have to follow their theory-driven prescription, which are completely at variance with our, a lot of the times, with our civilizational understanding. And they come completely in conflict, right? So, for example, the Saraswati not being worshipped in my institute. There is no wrong or anything about it. If you can't do that, it will only sort of celebrate civilizational continuity. But we can't do that because we have chosen to accept the Western secularism. So I got a question actually from someone.
Sorry.
He said that how would you sort of uh, define dharma in Sanskrit, translate religion in Sanskrit. So the question is here, how can we translate religion in Sanskrit or other Indian languages given dharma is not the right term? This is very important. For example, in Japanese, the original word for their dharma or their tradition was a different word. It used to be, so they invented a new word, Sukya or something like that, so denote religion. So I think in India, the idea of madhab is basically a sampradaya. So many people try to call dharma as panth and all, and that's how they try to sort of um, go by this conflict. But then basically, uh, if you look at, I think the best word for that would be, so because religions are faith about afterlife, and your all your opinions are coming from faith. There is no this world or sort of scientific basis for that, or sort of a empirical basis for that. So I think we can call it Biswasbad. It's a sort of a faith. It's an opinion based on a faith. So I think Biswasbad would be like sort of a more common word, but it is a neologism. You have to sort of coin it. It requires a lot of authority and other things to do that.
There is one question, a follow-up question actually.
Yes.
Uh, Anupji has asked, sir, can dharma be defined as duty?
Dharma is sort of, I think the right, correct. The dharma is sort of means balance, whatever sustains. Of course, duty is the primary thing that sort of sustains us in this world. So I would say definitely duty is very closest to what we know. But the idea is again, dharma can be, there are multifarious duties. And so the most prominent translator of Mahabharata in English is Vivek Devroy, who passed away a few months, maybe a year or ago. He has a very important thing to say. He said that basically Mahabharata is conflict of different dharmas, conflict of different dharmas. So the duties are also sort of have contradictions each other, and that contradiction Arjuna faced in Gita and all. And then in the towards the end, so basically Sri Krishna said, "Sarvadharmam parityajya mamekam saranam braja." So it talks about a concept where all dharmas can be harmonized by a dharma towards Atman. So these are very more deeper philosophical notes. But the point I'm trying to say that essentially dharma is duty is probably the correct one, but that duty has to be sort of defined by various forces of the universe, not by sort of some limited understanding as modernity often does.